It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon, the kind where the house smelled faintly of tea and the sound of the clock filled the silence. But instead, my world shattered with a scream. "Get out of my life!" Those words didn't just echo through the walls. They tore through me like glass. My own daughter, my only child, stood before me, her face twisted with anger I couldn't recognize. I froze where I stood, my hand still clutching the dish towel. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. Surely she didn't mean me. Surely she couldn't be speaking to the woman who had carried her, raised her, given her every ounce of love she had. But her eyes, those eyes I once kissed goodnight when she was a baby, were cold now. They burned with a hatred that left me trembling. "Don't you get it?" she shouted louder, her voice cracking. "I don't want you in my life anymore. You're nothing but a burden." My lips parted, but no words came out. I wanted to say something, anything. Remind her of the years I had spent fighting for her, the sacrifices she had never seen. But my throat felt like it was filled with stone. Outside, I could hear the shuffle of neighbors slowing their steps. Curtains shifted in windows. Shame crawled up my spine like a fire. My own child was disgracing me, not in whispers, but in screams that everyone could hear. I reached out a hand, my voice shaking. "Sweetheart, please." "You don't mean that." She slapped my hand away. "Don't call me that. I'm not your sweetheart. Not anymore." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, quietly, like glass underfoot. My mind flooded with images I didn't want to see. The first time she called me Mama. The afternoons I stayed up sewing her school uniforms when we couldn't afford new ones. The nights I sat beside her sick bed, praying she would breathe easier by morning. Every memory rose like a wave, only to be drowned out by the sting of her words. "Get out," she hissed, her voice dropping low but sharp enough to cut. "Leave me alone forever." I stepped back. My breath shook as if the air itself had turned against me. My feet felt heavy, but I forced them to move. One step, then another. The wooden floor creaked under my weight, as if even the house mourned with me. Behind me, the slam of the door rang out like a gunshot. I flinched, my hand pressed to my chest. That sound, it was final. It was the sound of a child shutting her mother out of her life. On the other side of the door, I heard her voice one last time, low, angry, and unyielding. "I never want to see you again." My knees almost gave way right there on the porch, but I forced myself to stand tall. The street was silent except for the faint whispers of neighbors hiding behind curtains. I could feel their pity like daggers in my back. I clutched the railing, my knuckles white, and whispered to myself, "She doesn't mean it." She can't mean it. But the words rang hollow. Because deep down I knew this was no passing tantrum. Something inside her had changed, something dark I couldn't yet understand. With slow, trembling steps, I walked down the path, each footstep heavier than the last. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I had been cast out. Not by strangers, not by the world, but by the one person I had lived for. And as the night crept in, and the echo of that slammed door still rang in my ears, I realized this was only the beginning. The night after she threw me out, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with a pain that refused to ease. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face twisted in anger, heard her voice spitting words I could never have imagined. "Get out of my life." And then, like an old film reel, my mind began playing back the years she had forgotten. I remembered the winter nights when we had nothing but one blanket between us. I would pretend I wasn't cold, pulling the thin fabric over her small body, whispering, "Mama's fine, baby. You stay warm." My teeth would chatter in the dark, but I never let her see. I remembered working double shifts at the diner, my feet aching so badly I could hardly stand, but still carrying home a paper bag with a little treat for her, an apple pie slice she always loved. Her eyes would light up, and for a moment, all the pain in my body felt worth it. There were birthdays when money was too tight for gifts. I stayed up late sewing old scraps into new clothes for her dolls, wrapping them carefully so she would wake to something special. She never knew the new doll dress was just cut from one of my worn-out blouses. She never knew I went hungry so she could have cake on her birthday. The school years were the hardest. Other parents showed up to PTA meetings dressed neatly, with smiles that spoke of comfort and ease. I came in my grease-stained diner uniform, hair pulled back, exhausted after a 14-hour shift. But I was there, always there. I never missed a single play, a single recital, a single parent meeting, and I remembered her face, her small hand waving at me from the stage, her smile so wide. Back then, she looked at me like I was her whole world. And for me, she was mine, but as she grew older, the gratitude faded. Little by little, I saw the changes. The way she rolled her eyes when I couldn't afford brand-name sneakers. The way she sighed when I reminded her to focus on her studies. She started wanting more than I could give. And I gave until there was nothing left. I sold my mother's gold bangle, my only keepsake from her, just to pay for my daughter's senior trip. She never knew the tears I cried that night, holding the empty space on my wrist where that bangle used to be. All I wanted was for her to have what I never did. A chance, an education, a future without hunger or shame. I broke my body for it. I bent my pride for it, and now, she called me a burden. Lying there in the dark, I pressed my hands against my chest, as if I could hold my heart together before it cracked apart. How quickly love could be forgotten. How easily sacrifices could vanish from memory. I told myself she didn't mean it. That maybe life had confused her, that maybe someone had poisoned her mind. But deep down, a voice whispered a truth I didn't want to face. My daughter, the very child I had given my soul to, no longer saw me as her mother. She saw me as an obstacle, and though my heart begged me to keep holding on, another part of me wondered if I had already lost her for good. The days after her rejection felt like walking through shadows. I went through the motions, breathing, eating, speaking, but inside I was hollow. And in that emptiness, memories rose again. Not of her childhood this time, but of my own silent battles. I had carried burdens she would never know. When her father walked out, she was too young to understand. She only knew that one day her daddy stopped coming home. But I knew the truth. I knew the nights I stayed awake, staring at the door, praying it would open, praying he would come back. He never did. I learned quickly that tears didn't pay bills, so I dried my face and took on every job I could find. In the mornings, I cleaned offices before the sun rose. At noon, I waitressed, smiling at strangers while my own heart ached. At night, I sewed clothes for neighbors, squinting in dim light until my fingers bled. There were days I thought I couldn't go on. My body begged for rest, but the sound of my daughter's breathing in the next room kept me alive. I told myself, you can't break, not now. She needs you. And so I didn't. I remember one winter when fever gripped me so hard I could barely stand. My body shivered under blankets, sweat soaking through my clothes. But my daughter's school tuition was due, and there was no one else to pay it. I dragged myself out of bed, every step like walking on broken glass, and went to work. My legs shook. My vision blurred. But I kept going. Because what was my pain compared to her future? No one applauded. No one offered help. The world doesn't stop to notice mothers who sacrifice themselves in silence. And I never asked for thanks. All I wanted was a little respect. A little love in return. But as she grew older, that love turned to something else. She became impatient with me. Embarrassed of me. She wanted to hide the truth of who raised her. While her friends boasted of vacations and gifts, she looked at me with disdain, as though my struggles were a stain on her life. She didn't see the nights I stayed up calculating bills, trying to stretch pennies into meals. She didn't see me selling my own wedding ring just to buy her a computer for school. She didn't see the tears I swallowed each time I told her, "No, I don't need anything new," so she could have what she wanted. All she saw was what I couldn't give. The more she demanded, the less she remembered. Gratitude vanished, replaced by entitlement. And each time she raised her voice, each time her eyes narrowed with resentment, I wondered, when did my daughter stop being my little girl? When did she decide my love wasn't enough? I carried these questions like stones in my chest. Heavy, suffocating, unanswerable. And yet, even as her cruelty deepened, I clung to hope. Hope that the girl I once knew was still in there somewhere. That behind the harsh words and cold eyes, there was still a child who remembered the mother who gave her everything. But deep down, I felt it, a shift. A distance widening between us that no amount of sacrifice could bridge. And in the silence of those nights, I began to wonder if all my years of struggle had only raised someone who would one day destroy me. The distance between us grew wider with every passing day. What once were quiet disagreements turned into sharp arguments, and those arguments turned into open wounds. Her words. They weren't careless slips of the tongue anymore. They were poison. Deliberate and cruel. "You're useless," she sneered one morning, her arms crossed, her phone in her hand. "You don't understand anything about my life. You don't belong in it." I stood there, stunned, clutching the grocery bag I had carried home. My hands trembled as I unpacked vegetables she would never thank me for buying. "Why would you say that?" I asked softly, hoping she might hear the hurt in my voice. She rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with disgust. "Because it's true. All you do is nag me. You don't know what it's like to live in the real world. You're just dragging me down." Her boyfriend had started visiting more often by then. A slick young man with an easy smile and eyes that never met mine. I could see the way he whispered into her ear, smirking whenever I entered the room. His presence only fed the fire burning inside her. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "She's pathetic," my daughter muttered, her voice sharp. "She has no money, no life. I don't even know why I still let her stay here." My chest tightened and I leaned against the wall, my hands trembling. "Then kick her out," the boyfriend said casually, as if I were a piece of trash on the curb. "You don't owe her anything. She's holding you back." A silence followed and then a laugh. My daughter's laugh. I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. That sound. It was worse than the words. It meant she agreed. The days after that were unbearable. She no longer hid her disdain. If I asked her how school was going, she snapped. If I reminded her to eat, she scoffed. If I tried to hug her, she pulled away as if my touch burned her, and the neighbors noticed. One of them, an older woman from down the street, pulled me aside one afternoon. "I heard shouting again last night," she whispered kindly. "Are you all right, dear?" I forced a smile, blinking back tears. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just a little misunderstanding." But inside, I wasn't fine. Inside, I was breaking. The final straw came on a Sunday evening. Dinner sat untouched on the table, the aroma of stew filling the air. She stormed in, tossing her bag onto the floor. "You're still cooking this cheap food?" She spat, wrinkling her nose. "Do you even realize how embarrassing you are?" "Embarrassing?" My voice cracked as I repeated the word. "Yes," she shouted. "My friends laugh at me because of you. Because of your old clothes, your stupid job, your pathetic life. Don't you get it? You're nothing to me." Her words struck like lightning, each syllable burning through me. I felt my knees weaken, my breath coming shallow. I whispered, "I gave you everything I had." She slammed her hand against the table, rattling the dishes. "And I didn't ask you to. Stop acting like you're some hero. You're just a burden." "You've always been a burden," the room spun. I stared at her, but the little girl I once knew was gone. In her place stood a stranger, her face twisted with contempt. And then she delivered the blow I had feared all along. "Get out. I don't want you here anymore. I don't want you in my life. Leave, and don't ever come back." Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't soften. She meant every word. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. The walls seemed to close in. My vision blurred with tears, and in that moment I realized the betrayal was complete. The daughter I had lived for, fought for, sacrificed for, had chosen to cut me out of her world entirely. The door slammed behind me once again, but this time, I knew. She wasn't just angry. She wasn't just lashing out. She truly wanted me gone. The night she forced me out, I didn't take much. Just a small bag with a change of clothes, a few photographs, and an old scarf my mother had left me. That was all I could carry, and all she would let me have. I walked slowly down the dark street, the weight of the bag nothing compared to the weight in my chest. Each step felt like it carried me further from the life I had built, the home I had fought to keep together. My body moved, but my heart lagged behind, broken and scattered in the house I was no longer welcome in. It was late when I knocked on an old friend's door. Mary, my neighbor from years back, opened it, her face softening the moment she saw me standing there, tears streaking my cheeks. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, pulling me inside without hesitation. "What happened?" But how could I explain? How could I put into words that my own daughter had cast me aside as if I were nothing? The shame was too raw, too deep. So I just shook my head and murmured, "I just need a place to stay tonight." Mary didn't press. She gave me a blanket, a warm cup of tea, and a quiet space to grieve. As I sat there staring into the steam rising from the cup, I realized how fragile I felt. Humiliated, abandoned, alone. And yet, somewhere beneath the sorrow, a spark flickered. I thought about everything I had endured in my life. The heartbreak of a husband walking out, the endless struggle to provide, the countless sacrifices that nearly broke me. I had survived it all before. Could I not survive this too? Lying on that borrowed couch, I stared into the dark and whispered to myself, "I will not let her destroy me." The next morning, I folded my blanket neatly and thanked Mary with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I could see pity in her gaze, but also admiration. She knew perhaps better than anyone that I wasn't the kind of woman who stayed broken for long. I carried on quietly over the next few days, staying in Mary's spare room, helping her around the house and keeping my mind busy. But every night when silence returned, the ache crept back in. The image of my daughter's cold eyes haunted me, and the echo of her words, burden, useless, leave, played like a cruel song I couldn't escape. Still, I began to notice something different in myself. The pain was no longer paralyzing me. It was hardening into something else. Not hatred. I could never hate her, no matter how much she hurt me. But strength. A quiet strength that whispered, "You are not finished yet." The world thought I was powerless. My daughter thought she had silenced me forever. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was only the pause before something far greater. It had only been a week. 7 days since I walked away from the house that once held my dreams. 7 nights of fighting back tears in the quiet of Mary's guest room. I had started to tell myself this was my new life. Invisible, forgotten, unwanted. But then came the knock. It was early morning, the sun barely rising when the pounding started at the gate. At first I thought it was the milkman or a delivery. But then I heard the voice, "Mama! Mama, please." I froze. My heart stopped mid-beat. That voice. It was hers. I moved slowly toward the window, careful not to be seen. And there she was, my daughter. The same child who had screamed at me, spat words like poison, and shut me out of her life. But now she stood at the gate, disheveled, her hair a tangled mess, her clothes rumpled and dirty. Tears streaked her face as she clung to the iron bars as though they were the only thing keeping her upright. "Mama, I'm sorry," she cried, her voice hoarse. "Please!" "Let me in." I pressed a hand to my chest. 1,000 emotions surged at once. Pain, anger, confusion, and something dangerously close to pity. She looked nothing like the proud, arrogant girl who had shoved me aside. Her boyfriend was nowhere to be seen. The friends she once boasted about had abandoned her. And now she was alone, trembling at my gate. I stood behind the curtain, hidden, watching. My heart wanted to run to her, to cradle her like I had when she was a child. But another part of me, the part still raw from her cruelty, kept me frozen. The pounding grew louder. Her voice cracked with desperation. "I have nowhere else to go. He left me, Mama. He left me for someone else. My friends. They laughed at me. They said I deserved it. Please, Mama, don't leave me out here. Her sobs pierced the morning air, loud enough that neighbors began to gather. Curtains shifted. Doors opened slightly. Whispers spread down the street. That's her daughter, isn't it? One voice murmured. The one who drove her mother out? Yes, another whispered back. Now look at her, begging at the gate. The shame that had once been mine was now hers, and for the first time, she felt the sting of the world's eyes watching, judging. I closed my eyes and let her words wash over me. The irony was bitter. 1 week ago, she had slammed the door in my face and told me she never wanted to see me again. Now she was on her knees begging me not to leave her outside. Mama, please, she sobbed again, her voice breaking completely. I was wrong. I was so wrong. Don't turn your back on me. Inside, my hands trembled. My heart ached. I wanted to believe her, but I could still hear her voice echoing in my memory. You're a burden. You're nothing to me. And so I stood there, silent, torn between the mother who wanted to forgive and the woman who remembered the betrayal. Through the bars of that gate, two worlds collided, hers broken and desperate, and mine, scarred but still standing, and in that moment I realized the power had shifted. I stood behind the gate, silent, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. She sobbed, her small hands gripping the iron bars as if her life depended on it, which in that moment, it did. Mama. Please, she begged again, her voice breaking. I know I was wrong. I've been awful. Don't leave me out here. I'm begging you. I studied her face, tear-streaked and desperate, and for the first time, I saw what pride and arrogance had hidden. A frightened, vulnerable girl. The same little girl I had held in my arms through fevers, scraped knees, and sleepless nights. The same girl who had once whispered, Mama, I love you, when the world felt too big to face alone, but I didn't rush forward. I didn't open the gate immediately. Instead, I let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. Let her feel the weight of the walls she had built between us. Let her understand in the deepest part of her soul what it meant to push someone away who had given everything. Her sobs grew louder. Her knees scraped against the hard concrete. Her words became frantic, raw with regret. Mama, please. I'm sorry. I can't do this alone. I was stupid. I was selfish. I see now. I see everything I did wrong. I stepped out slowly, letting the sunlight catch the lines of my face, the quiet strength I had cultivated in the week she thought she had broken me. She froze. Her eyes widened. She didn't expect calm. She didn't expect dignity. She expected desperation, tears, pleading. And yet I was steady. I was unshaken. Kneeling at my gate will not erase the past, I said softly, my voice calm but firm. You have to understand what you've done. You've hurt me deeply. And love. Love isn't about demanding or mocking. It's about respect, loyalty, and kindness. Her face crumpled. She pressed her hands to her mouth, ashamed even as she cried. I know, Mama, she whispered, barely audible. I will do better. I'll never take you for granted again, I nodded slowly. You will earn your way back. Not because I am cruel, but because life teaches lessons best when we feel their weight. Come in. But remember, respect and honesty must guide you from now on. Her eyes shimmered with gratitude and relief. She rose, stepping past the gate, and I felt a rush of love tempered with caution. The roles had shifted, but the bond remained, fragile, renewed, and wiser. As she reached for my hand, I held her gently, letting her feel the steadiness that had carried us both through years of hardship. That morning, the sun didn't just rise over the street. It rose over a new beginning, a lesson learned, a mother's strength reclaimed, and a daughter humbled, ready to walk forward with understanding. In that quiet moment, I realized that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits patiently, behind a gate, in silence, until the lesson is understood and the heart is ready to return. And as we stepped back inside together, I knew The bond we had nearly lost was now stronger, tempered by pain, forgiveness, and the quiet power of truth.